All right, guys, today we are going to cover Unit 2, Economic Indicators in the Business Cycle. So let's go ahead and start topic 2.1, which is the circular flow model and GDP. All right. Now, macroeconomics is the study of the large economy, right, as a whole. We look at the big picture. So why do we study economics? Well, the reason why we study economics is because and the reason it was born is out of the Great Depression, right? We had a real bad economy with a high unemployment rate, right? Um, and that unemployment rate, and we needed to figure out a way to fix that problem, right? And so macroeconomics is actually born that from that problem, right? The Great Depression. So there's always been some form of economics, right? Micro economics. It started kind of with Adam Smith back in the 1700s, right? But here we're talking about macroeconomics, and that's just kind of stems from the Great Depression. And so the two reasons why we have macroeconomics is to measure the health of the whole economy. So kind of as doctors, right, we're going to see symptoms and see if the economy is doing well or if they're not doing well, if it's sick, right? And then we would guide policies to fix the problems, or we would offer suggestions to the government of how, or economists, right, would offer suggestions how to fix the situation, right? And so from that we get, or moving on, we're going to go into the circular flow model. Now, the circular flow model is essentially everything that you're going to learn in this course and how things move around in the particular market, right? So you could see that there are, four different area or five different areas in a circular flow model. You have the resource market, you have the individuals, you have the product market, and you have businesses, and of course the government in the middle. Okay, and so just a little bit of vocabulary. The private sector is the part of the government that's run by individuals or businesses, so that's private, right? The public sector is going to be controlled by the government, so like public schools, stuff like that. Parks and stuff like that would be all public sector. Factor payments, if you remember the factors of production, right? Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. These are the payments for those, right? So you got rent, wages, interest, and profit, right? And then transfer payments. Transfer payments are when the government is reallocating wealth, right? Or redistributing wealth. And they can do that through welfare. They can do that through Social Security checks. They can do that, of course, through stimulus checks. And then, of course, subsidies. So subsidies are when the government pays a business to, maybe that business is something that's vital to our need for to produce or to stay healthy or something like that, but it's not very profitable. So the government will step in and they will pay that company to continue doing what they're doing. Okay, and so in our circular flow model, you can see like individuals, right? They're going to supply their labor, right, to the resource market, which then the resource market will allocate that towards businesses. And then, of course, at the businesses, it provides goods and services, where the product market is, let's say, like a place in the mall or something like that, or a store is a product market, right? And so businesses offer goods and services. Those goods and services go to the product market. The product market, or to goods and services, go to individuals. In return for that, right, individuals are getting an income. And of course, you can kind of follow this diagram all around. You can see the government's in the middle. They provide public goods to businesses and to individuals in exchange for taxes, where they give, again, that redistribution of subsidies to the businesses, and then welfare to individuals that are in need of that. Right? So that essentially is the circular flow model. Okay. Now the economy moving into how the three goals of every macroeconomy is: one, we promote economic growth; two, we limit unemployment; and then three, we keep prices stable or limit inflation. So these are three ways that we can look to see how the economy is doing, right? We look at economic growth through GDP. We can look at limiting unemployment by the unemployment rate, and then keeping prices stable. All right, so how do we measure economic growth? So economists, what they do is they collect statistics, they collect on production, income, investment, and savings, and this is called national income accounting, right? So think of, like you individually kind of do your own accounting of how much you get, and you're there in your computer, you're checking your bank statements, everything like that. You know how much money is coming in. Maybe you have some savings accounts over here. Countries do essentially the same thing as you individually, but at a much larger scale, right? Of course. So one important measure of all this, right, is the growth of GDP. Now, GDP is a pretty simple concept, right? It's a gross domestic product, and it's the dollar value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given year. Now, it's important to understand some key factors here. One is dollar value. So it's going to be measured in dollars. Why is it going to be measured in dollars? It's measured in dollars so that we're able to compare, like, let's say, how the United States is doing to Mexico, right? Since Mexico uses the peso, right? So if we put it in dollars, they're all in like terms. We don't have to convert anything. So it makes it simple to allow us to compare, right? Final goods are, only new goods and services count, right? Not used goods. And why do we count used goods? Because those have already been counted, right? So like anything from Goodwill or anything that you sell secondhand, that would not count. Or anything you put on Craigslist is probably going to be not count towards GDP, right? Produced in a country within a given year, of course, it's got to be within our borders, right? It cannot be produced, even if it's an American-made company in, let's say, Germany, right? Or let's say Germany decides they're going to build a Mercedes company here, or Mercedes factory over here, or BMW, whatever, and they decide, hey, look, that's not going to count towards Germany's GDP, even though it's a German country. That would actually count towards the American GDP. All right, and then of course it's measured annually. Now they take GDP quarterly, right? So you can see every quarter what the current GDP is, but we at the end will just measure it annually. So what does GDP tell us? So again, GDP can tell us how we're doing, how well we're doing financially, but it also can answer a few questions for us. It can compare how we're doing from previous years. Are we doing better? Are we growing, or are we shrinking, right? It can tell us the policies that are in effect, the Congress and the president, if the policies that they're passing, is that working for us? And then again, we're able to compare us to other countries. We're able to see, are we in fact, doing better than, say, China, or are we in fact doing better than the EU or whatever, right? Now, an equation that we're going to see throughout this course, right, is similarly set up to this equation. It's kind of the same equation for a lot of the things that you guys are going to be doing. So we want to see what the percentage change is from GDP from year to year, right? And so how do we see that percentage change? The equation is going to be year 2 minus year 1 over year 1 times 100. So this is equal to the percentage change. So it's going to be essentially the again, year 2 minus year 1 minus year 1 over year 1 times 100, okay? And then a real easy way to kind of remember that is no over O, right? So new minus old over old, right? And so essentially what you should see is always a positive value if your GDP is increasing, right? So if you notice, like, if year 1 the number is larger than year 2, then you'll see a negative value, just the way this is set up, right? Because your negative number, or you're subtracting, right? So your larger number should always be up front, or if you're seeing growth, right? Now, if you're not seeing growth, then of course you'll see a negative GDP, right? So just looking at the two values, you should be able to determine, is it a positive or a negative growth? And then from that, when you do the equation, you should be able to see, is it a positive or negative percentage change, okay? Very important to look at that and to understand that concept, okay? Now, let's go ahead and move on. So so GDP is great, right? But it doesn't capture everything, right? And there's a better way of capturing a lot of stuff, right? But what economists will use is GDP per capita, right? They want to make sure that the size of the population is reflected and adjusted for. So they'll use GDP per capita. So they'll take their GDP and then they're going to divide it by the population, and then that's essentially going to give you how much one person produces in the economy, right? And so that tells us a better standard of living, right? Because if you have a larger per person GDP, then essentially your income should be larger, so you're able to purchase more things, right? So leading to a better standard of living, right? Now, some reasons why some countries have higher GDPs than other countries have to do with a few key concepts. One being economic systems. Remember that capitalism it promotes innovation and provides incentive to improve productivity. It also, the economic capitalism protects the inventor, right? So people aren't afraid to produce new and better and inventive things, right? Rule of law, right? Countries with solid institutions and political stability have historically more economic growth. You have capital stock. Now, the capital stock is machines and tools that make you more productive, right? That like moving to automation and stuff like that, like where machines kind of build cars for us and stuff like that, so that we have more time to invest in leisure activities, right? And then human capital, of course, the education systems and the training that people get allow them to produce more, right? And then natural resources, the more access you have to natural resources, right? And then the thing that's really important to understand here, right, and to grasp is that it comes down to one thing: productivity. Like, how much are you able to produce, right? One person. So if the country has these tools set up properly and you're able to produce more or your output is greater than other countries, then you should be able to have a larger GDP. Okay? All right. And so that leads us to what is not included in the GDP. So there's a few things that are not included. That's intermediate goods. Intermediate goods are goods that are already in a car, or in the product, right? So, for example, cars, right, come with a lot of different features, right? But you don't pay for those features individually. You pay for the car itself. So those, the windshield, the tires, the engine, all of those things are separate things that you can buy on your own, right? But when you buy a car, you buy all those together. So the bill's one large bill, right? So those intermediate goods wouldn't count in that case. Now, let's say that you go to, a car part place and AutoZone or something like that, and you buy an engine, then that's the final good. It's not an intermediate good in that case, right? So just kind of keep an eye out for that. Now, non-production transactions, this is stuff that's not being produced, right? That won't count. So stocks, right? You get interest on stocks, and you get interest on, and then you can sell bond for the interest rates, right? And real estate, those all don't count towards non-production, or those are all not considered. Financial transactions are considered non-production, right? Because you're not producing anything. However, now real estate, if you're renting out, like if you buy a house and you rent that house out, like an apartment or something like that, then that would be considered under I. But if I were to go and, let's say, just buy a house, that's not included. It's only included in I if you're renting it out. Now, used goods, right? Again, anything that you buy from Goodwill, anything that you buy from OfferUp is most likely going to be used, so those would also not be non-production transactions. And then, of course, non-market and illegal activities, so things that are made at home, like, your mom bakes some cookies, right? And so that would be a non-market activity, right? She's making those for the house. So, the government doesn't equate for your mom cooking cookies, right? Now, if she were to take those cookies and then she goes and sells them, opens up a shop and sells them, then they would be counted, right? So some of these things we got to kind of work through and think about, right? Any volunteer work, those things are also not included, okay? Now, there's 3 ways to calculate GDP. The most used approach is the expenditures approach, and that's when we just add up all the final goods and services produced in a given year. Now, of course, you could also just take the income from all of those services and see what that is, and that the income should equal what you're selling, right? So the income approach and the expenditures approach should equal up. And then, of course, there's the last one, which is the value-added approach, which adds up all the dollar value added at each stage of production and process. So each method should generate the same value. Okay, so the income approach again is going to be labor income, rental income, interest income, and then profit, right? All of these taken from the factors of production, referred to more commonly in this context as factor payments, right? Now, the expenditures approach is going to have 4 components to it. And this is the big equation for this class, right? Is that you're going to have consumer spending, you're going to have business investment, you're going to have government spending, and you're going to have net exports, right? So C plus I plus G plus Xn. C being consumer spending, I being business investment, G being government spending, and then X minus M meaning net exports, right? So real important to understand with business investment, this isn't a personal finance class, this is an economics class. So when we talk about business investment, we're talking about businesses that are buying equipment to make their businesses better. So like if Walmart or if Whataburger or if some national chain were to buy fryers, right? That would be business investment. Fryers that can cook French fries much quicker, right? That would be considered under business investment, okay? Or any product that a business buys to make their business better, okay? Now, consumer spending is made up of 3 different components. This is made up of durable goods, right? Durable goods are stuff that's going to last a long time. These big purchases like washing machines, refrigerators, dishwashers, stuff like that. Stuff that's going to last you a long time, right? And then non-durable goods are like food, clothes, toilet paper, stuff that you'll buy more regularly. And then, of course, services. And then services would be like dental work, repairs, tutoring, stuff like that. So, now, again, I mentioned earlier that investment refers to businesses making themselves better. So, now the last, and then government. So government expenditures tracks the spendings made in the public sector. So this includes payments made to the government for goods and services, right? So think of G when the government spends, right? So C is when consumers spend, right? And then through those 3 different ways. Then I is when businesses spend to make their businesses better. And then G, of course, is when the government spends. Now the government can spend through public spending, right? Like parks or military defense or road works, stuff like that, infrastructure. Those would all be under G. Now, what doesn't get counted, right, is money that's spent on transfer payments like welfare, Social Security, and subsidies, right? Those things do not count for GDP. All right, so that is it for 2.1. Thank you guys, and we will see you guys later.